Okay, great. So I think we can start the Hangout for today. And thanks for everyone for joining us and watching this session. For today, we are trying to have a meaningful discussion about civil society from the MENA region and to see what kind of challenges and barriers they are facing. We are trying first to evaluate and assess the ground, if we can say so, and then we try to see what kind of recommendation and action we can take to move forward. And for that, we invited several speakers today in order to share their own experience and to have the debate. We will start first with Mohammed Taraqiya from Jordan, and he will highlight first some of his funding and findings in the report he wrote a few months ago for APC, the Association for Progressive Communication. And then we will move with Walid Saqa from Yemen to share his own experience in the internet governance space, and then to Elsa Saadeh from Lebanon, and also with Hamza from Tunisia. So let's start first with Mohammed Taraqiya. Mohammed, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Glad to join.
So, yeah. So thanks for joining us, Mohammed. Can you, please introduce in a few minutes the report and really kind of highlight the main findings, what you find as a problem and challenges from civil society in the region, and kind of explain to us what do you think is the way to go forward.
Certainly. The report is called Challenges to Civil Society Participation in the Internet Governance in the MENA region. It was published by APC in May 2016. In the report, we tried to look at the landscape of internet governance in the region and took 4 examples from 4 countries, which are Egypt, Tunis, Jordan, and Lebanon. And we tried to link the regional challenges to local challenges and sort of the state of the internet rights in the region. And we looked at what civil society in these countries were doing and sort of tried to just map that whole landscape. And in the end, we provided some recommendations. And the thing is, in the report, we found out that that the human rights, the state of internet rights in the region is closely linked to human rights in the region. There was a margin of freedom in the early 21st century where people enjoyed more freedoms online, but this margin started to close as governments caught up in terms of technology as well as legislation. So what we saw in the 4 countries is that recently there's been increasingly more and more internet legislation being introduced, and most of it has been restrictive and sort of mirrors the legislation that restricted offline behavior. We also looked at the regional platforms. We looked at the story of the Arab IGF, which happened for the past 4 years, and we looked at how it started. I tried to start a conversation between different stakeholders in the region and where it failed and where it succeeded, including promoting other initiatives in the region, such as this initiative, MENA, different schools of internet governance, and the different policy camps that happened around that platform in order to promote an understanding of internet governance issues and try to integrate civil society in this space. In terms of conclusions, what we found was that even though the specific context in different countries provided different challenges, to the civil society organizations working in internet policy. The challenges that they tried to address, or sort of the activities, were the same. So it was mainly centered around monitoring violations of internet rights, pushing for protections of activists prosecuted for enjoying their internet freedom, and advocating for better laws. But for example, we had different sort of, the civil society in different countries were facing different threats. So in Tunis, it was a post-revolution sort of era, so there was, in some ways, there were more freedoms, but in the same ways trying to preserve sort of the outputs of the revolution, sort of like in the areas of freedom of expression and privacy. In Egypt, what we saw was an increasing crackdown on civil society. So, and in the end, there was limited or no space for civil society to operate, which is very alarming. In Jordan, what we saw was sort of, there was more civil society engagement, but in many cases it was slow and with so many setbacks that it didn't really manage to make much of a difference. And in Lebanon, what we saw was the political situation really affected, even though Lebanon has a vibrant civil society, the political situation and the intractability sort of causes an environment where it's hard for civil society to achieve much, despite having so much effort and so many different actors operating in the space. This is by far most of the conclusions that we arrived to in the papers.
Okay. Thanks, Mohammed, for this intervention. So I think we see that the country that they went through the revolution and those not, and even so, there are some I mean, the cases differ between them, and I mean, I'm not sure if we kind of the situation is gloomy or not, but we are trying here maybe to see how we can do better acknowledging the reality in the ground. But let's maybe move first with Walid, and he can probably give us some insight about a specific experience like the Arab IGF and explain what his perception of the current internet governance space in the region. Walid? Okay. Maybe Walid is facing some technical problem. We cannot hear him. In the meantime, maybe we can move to Elsa and waiting for Walid to come back. Elsa, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. So Elsa, we as you know, we have several questions that we were asking for this hangout and to try to respond to them. So if you have maybe some insight about them, so you can elaborate some answer.
Yeah, surely. So the first thing that came to my mind when we said the current state of civil society participation in internet governance, I kind of personalized it as to my own experience and how I got to know this space. It started with the course, internet governance course, which several of us were also a part of. And then bit by bit, with the help of funding, I was capable of going to different other conferences around the world. And that's where I started to meet, let's say, like Walid, I met him in a conference in Istanbul. Same goes to you. Same goes to Tarakia. I've met you guys in conferences around that have to do with internet governance. However, thinking of my own personal experience, I also think of other people who probably would not have had the chance to do such a thing and get involved as much as I did. Civil society, people who are engaged in civil society, who might not have known of these opportunities and who might not have been able to participate. That's one. Second, and from the perspective of the work that I do with Gulf Center for Human Rights, many human rights defenders in the Gulf actually don't prioritize internet governance because of how many troubles they're having to face throughout their work or throughout their daily lives. So internet governance is not as much prioritized as we would have wanted them to have it in their priority list. So that is an issue that currently civil society organizations or individuals who are considered to be a part of civil society are having in the Gulf mainly. And then you have the issue of them being completely surveilled all the time. For instance, in Oman, they know that they're being surveilled all the time. So anything they write online or any kind of engagement they do abroad, there's always the fear of reprisal. So many of their voices are not being heard internationally, which somehow leaves a gap in our conversations amongst each other. Third of all, and something that Tarakia also mentioned, was the legislative restrictions, which are also increasing aside or in parallel to the shutdowns, in parallel to the constant targeting of people who are writing blogs. For instance, Raif Badawi is still in jail after his 50 vlogs. He is still in jail, though international pressures were increasing immensely for the past year. So that's a third challenge. And the fourth, which is more technical, would be the language barrier sometimes. Many of the people we have worked with in the Gulf don't actually have access to an English language, which makes it even harder for them to participate in internet governance forums and in internet governance related issues. And finally, and something that's very relevant to us, I'd say that maybe because of how different challenges arise in terms of digital rights, and maybe because of how much each and every one of us has a different way of looking at things and different themes to focus on, sometimes there is a lack of solidarity amongst us, or there is a lack of, I wouldn't want to say lack of solidarity, actually, I would like to say a lack of coordination, because mainly we all know that, like, when I got to meet you, Rafiq, you got to, let's say, open up a door for ICANN, Walid opened the door for ISOC, Taraki opened the door for APC, and that's how coordination happened and collaboration happened, and that made us stronger. And I still sense that in civil society, like, civil society participation lacks this kind of intense coordination amongst us. And that would be my ask. My ask would be to engage further in each other's strengths. Finally, I'd like to say that aside from government pressures in the region, and aside from the fact that funding issues arise, for instance, we all have issues finding funding to go places. Like, for instance, I still haven't found funding to go to the IGF. Many people also find it hard to find funding to go places, and in internet governance forums, especially women human rights defenders in the region, though their engagement is increasing, but still also funding is an issue. I'd say the biggest issue in the civil society participation is us being more engaged in a way that is prioritizing solidarity and inter-civil society collaboration, let's say. I'll leave it to here.
Thanks, Elsa. I think you made several points and raised several issues. And I think you used a kind of interesting keyword, like opening the doors and solidarity and coordination. We heard from Taraki about maybe differences between the countries in the region, and there are the realities are different between them. And so we need to see here how we can improve the situation, and I get the coordination as the first step. Also raised the point about funding and so on, and I guess it's also about understanding the counter processes. So maybe to follow up with that, I guess Walid can respond to the question we are raising for this session, and also develop regarding his own experience, and see what maybe other issues that he faced in a different context. For example, as the chair of the ISOC chapter for Yemen and so on. Walid, can you hear us? Walid? Okay. Okay. Still, we still sounds that Walid is still facing some problem to speak. Okay, so while waiting for Walid to come back again, I mean, that's the reality. Another barrier, it's not this technical barrier sometimes in terms of participation. But I think we can move to Hamza here, and he probably can give us some insight. He joined the space later, lately, and also he's working with MENA, and so he can give us probably a different point of view about the challenges faced by civil society.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this hangout. I'm really thrilled and excited to be here and to add my perspective on the issue. I think the point that has been raised are really accurate in terms of giving the real picture of what is happening in terms of civil society impact on the region. But I will go a little bit to history and to the early days of the Arab uprising, Arab revolutions that happened in the MENA region. And my perspective here is that a lot of the social groups and the people that we saw in the street who has been organizing themselves to try to organize themselves for regime change. Yes, we can hear you, Walid. So
yes, sorry, I had to restart the computer. Sorry if I interrupted. You can resume, Hamza, and then when you are ready.
Okay. So many of those groups that we have been seeing organizing themselves online didn't really yield success in terms of taking their demands to the next level, which means that the different regimes that we saw in the MENA region, whether in Tunisia or other countries, they didn't really take into account what those people were calling for. So, and my perspective here is that one of the basic problem is that those groups or civil society in the MENA region need more organization, and they need more alliances, and need more collaboration, and so a lot of the movement that we are seeing on the ground are a little bit scattered, and they and that's leaves the space for governments to implement top-down policies. And here we should not be so deterministic, because the environment in Tunisia is now a little bit open when it comes to opening the space for civil society groups, and we have been seeing like the with MENA we have been really active in building alliances, like for example the alliance Article 32, and we have been able to try to tackle different policies when it comes to data protection, censorship, and surveillance. But in other regions in the MENA region, this is not the reality. So a lot of government or countries, they still suffer from lack of transparency, arbitrary IP environment, lack of research, open consultation, and understanding of the internet governance environment, and even sometimes an over-regulation of internet governance. So I think what we need to really get more insights when it comes to the policy, develop policy research, and try to build local alliances and local understanding of the internet governance scene, then try to build alliances at the regional level. Like that, we can be more influential when it comes to pressuring or trying to put forward the policies of civil society in the MENA region.
Okay. Thanks, Hamza. It's interesting that you used other keywords, kind of about collaboration, scattered, and so on. It's quite interesting to that there is some agreement among you about this kind of issue, that there is a lack of coordination between the different players within civil society. I'm not sure if it's in the same even in the same country or just at the regional level. And so here we need maybe to think what kind of solution, what can be recommended here. But I think for now we finally get Walid, and we waited for him for a while to speak. So Walid, can you speak out this time?
Well, I hope so. Is my voice coming clear now?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's technology sometimes fails you. But sorry again, I enjoyed the discussion, and in fact, I think you saved me a lot of time because you mentioned much of what I wanted to say. Perhaps, but just giving things of my personal background, as you can imagine, I come from a human rights-oriented background. I have helped in circumventing censorship and felt strongly about the need to be more open, etc. So the problem I felt, or I understood from reactions to what I've done, is that we have a multi-layered problem, that the environment is not friendly to bottom-up approaches. So it's culturally patriarchy, social environments, even political, of course. They all don't help you promote the bottom-up approach. Additionally, the multi-stakeholder approach in itself is not fully understood. The word governance is wrongly interpreted as government, as many have mentioned before in terms of definition. And then there's the other layer, or let's say one of the bigger, maybe even a bigger problem, is that civil society itself has not absorbed its role, has not properly took its role seriously. And it's not because they don't want to, it is a combination from, as Hamza said, lack of coordination, and as inferred to earlier, lack of competence, proper knowledge and understanding of how to organize and bring in some strong strength in your activity and movement. And it is still linked to the culture aspect, because if you're raised in an environment that's been promoting a top-down approach, you suddenly want to rise up, you will be seen as more of an obstructor, or in fact a rebel in some cases. And depending on where you are in the Middle East or in the region as a whole, you may end up becoming somewhat like labeled as a traitor in instances like in the Gulf, where the situation is more extreme, as Elsa can perhaps indicate. And occasionally, when you have some breathing space, such as Lebanon maybe, or Tunisia right now, you keep on thinking of the consequences of what would happen to you in your own work environment, for example, or your livelihood. In fact, many civil society members I talk to constantly think of their sustainability. I mean, what if I reach a particular limit where I may be threatened of having my job terminated? Or there's no sense of security, there's no legal protection as well. And so there are many combinations, many things that contribute to the problem. So eliminating each one of those step by step could be helpful, and that requires a very long-term project, and it requires somewhat of studying how other nations or other regions in the world were able to evolve out of this situation and improve. So my first reaction would be to that we should first understand that it's going to be a very long and rocky journey. It started with the Arab IGF. In my naive, let's say, viewpoint, when I started the Arab IGF, I thought of immediately applying the international standard of multi-stakeholderism. I think you may have noticed that on the panels I was in, I was shunned many occasions. I had felt that I was surrounded by government spokesmen saying, "What are you trying to do?" You know, I tried to press the, let's say, push the envelope and press forward with an agenda, but at a particular point, I just realized that it's counterproductive. We'll have to use another approach, which might be that we begin depending on ourselves as civil society and build our own capacities, begin a long-term journey towards helping ourselves first. And once we begin to coordinate properly, once we understand whom to reach to, how to create power centers within the civil society network, how to leverage international organizations such as ISOC, ICANN, even the ITU in some cases if you are able to, and try to use that to your advantage and push the idea that this is good for everyone. It's not good for civil society alone. It's good for even for governments for having more stability. So good for openness. It's good for resilience of the internet as a whole. So thinking of the positive aspects of change is more constructive. And so long-term, 1, 2, thinking of the constructive, and positive aspects of the internet for everyone, and engaging with those who might appear to be anti-civil society. And third, and this is very crucial, is that we have to focus on capacity. We have to build our own abilities through training, through schools, and that's what MENA is good at, for example, and Diplo and others. These will help build us from within. So as I said, it's not going to happen overnight. It's a long journey, but I'm confident that with the right steps, we can get there.
Thanks, Walid. I mean, you really raised interesting points about the cultural aspects and also the environment. So it's, I guess it's kind of question for us how we can change the environment and the context to push for more bottom-up approach, how we can change that environment. And so we need to take some concrete action here. As you said, it's kind of long-term and long-term work, but we have to take it at some time. And also about building abilities. I want just maybe, I missed that, but I want to come back to a point made by Elsa about that many in civil society in the region don't see internet governance as a priority. So another question for us, how we can make internet governance as a part of the full picture of human rights. It's not just about online rights, but also it's about offline rights here, and see how we can make it a priority and to build awareness. And maybe just as a reminder for now, this hangout is with support of APC, which we are trying here to see what we can do in the region. And hopefully we can get a lot of input and suggestion today to see how we can move forward in future. So hearing all your intervention, I would to see if we can build some debate and discussion between you as the speakers, and if there is any maybe question from those who are watching us now. So do you want to add another point, or you want to respond to the speakers? So please do so. I don't want to put someone on the spot, but I can volunteer you folks, so it's better that you jump in. Yes, Mohammed, please go ahead.
Thank you. So just to answer your earlier point about the difference between countries that went through a revolution and didn't, I mean, this is one of the reasons I prefer to use the term uprising, because I think wherever you were in the Levant or in North Africa, in between the years 2011 to 2013, there was increased sort of political activity, and there was increased interest from a larger group of people to interact with the issues and get politically involved. And this also led to, which also corresponds to Elsa's point about funding, this also led to more interest from funders, usually like funders from the West, to fund civil initiatives in the region. So I think it might be interesting to look at countries where perhaps a regime change happened or didn't, but I think most countries in the region have some sort of increased political activity. And other points, in the research, we did not look at the Gulf, and that was intentional because it's really hard for, for us, for me, for example, as an activist based in the Levant, to interact with civil society in the Gulf, because most of the initiatives that are apparent to us are more top-down, and there's sort of a proliferation of these government-operated NGOs, which makes it very challenging to find sort of like actual civil society actors that we can engage, and sort of building a relationship of trust and these networks takes time. And so that's why, for example, having these regional meetings where we can have more access from the Gulf helps us sort of increase our networks and sort of build this cross-movement collaboration. And I think a key point here in sort of increasing civil society participation is building this trust relationship within civil society, and also between civil society and other partners, such as the government. I can speak a bit from experience in Jordan. It took us at the Jordan Open Source Association. It took us a long time of 7 years between sort of, at the beginning we used to like pretend to be students and try to get sort of draft laws in order to look at them. But now, for example, we have, after years of looking at laws and sort of engaging the Ministry of ICT, now we have an actual trust relationship, and we actually do workshops with partners in the government in order to talk to them about concepts such as multiculturalism and openness and open data. And now they actually seek us for input, but that didn't happen overnight. It took a very long time and a very hard process of building this trust. So I think that's one of the sort of the key recommendations. And one last point on, you asked how we can sort of make the general civil society interested in digital rights issues. I have two opinions about it. I think we need civil society organizations that are digital rights oriented and have a deep understanding of these issues. The thing is, right now in our region, those are very few and far between. So we need more of them, and we need more sort of civil society organizations that take digital rights issues as sort of a core part of their mission. And once we have that, we can work on other research, for example, looking at linking, for example, the impact of the internet on economic, cultural, and social rights, and political rights as well. And using this research, we can reach out to more traditional or more mainstream human rights organizations in the region and give them sort of evidence-based research on why they should care about digital rights issues. And I think once we reach that point where we have strong sort of core of digital rights organizations, as well as input that we can give to other organizations, let's say the more mainstream ones, I think that will create a very healthy sort of ecosystem. And I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Rafi?
Okay. Yes, Elsa. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to add to what Taraki just said, that it's very hard to get Gulf human rights defenders specifically, and even in Lebanon, who are from the Middle East, sometimes to get them interested in such an event. And the problem is that up until they get hacked, or they get an attempt of hacking, or they get something that is very personal, or that could impede their physical security, then they would become more interested in, okay, what's behind internet governance? What's behind the digital security issues? What is the policy development issues? What are the policy development issues that are being discussed currently? So one of the approaches that, excuse me, Gulf Center has been taking with women human rights defenders from the Gulf is that we start our trainings with physical security. And while they develop their contingency plans, their physical security contingency plans, they find out that a huge part of their physical security also depends on their digital security. And that's where we start off with a digital security aspect of the training. That was one approach that I thought it would be good to share with you guys. And in Lebanon, for instance, recently there was a case, a bunch of activists got an email with a phishing link. And after I discussed it with a security expert, it turns out that it was a targeted phishing link that wanted their information, their email information. And up until that time, they had never thought of anything that has to do with digital security. But when that happened to them, they decided they wanted a digital security training with a legislative aspect to it. They started looking into the laws in Lebanon. They started looking into how to get a technical security expert from Lebanon with Lebanese, like with an Arabic like background, for instance, because it would be easier for them to coordinate with them and communicate with them. So that is one thing we were keeping in mind for our trainings personally. Yeah, so, and I think also the importance of collecting case studies so that people would really sense that things are not just in the air, they're actually happening. Then people would become more interested in, like civil society organizations even would become more interested and would prioritize digital security over anything else, I think. Yep, that was my input.
Thanks, Elsa. Hearing you and Mohammed, I mean, what I can notice is there is need to make internet governance real and concrete, either for user and in particular for civil society organization. And this is through case studies, real examples. It's not just in talking in abstract. It's to make it more real for them to see how they are impacted. And this is the part of the awareness and capacity building. On the other hand, I think in terms of influencing policy, it's important to have more fact and evidence-based policy to influence. So I think this is something maybe we can elaborate and see how we can make it concrete, either by training or presentation and so on. I would like now to hear more from Walid and Hamza, if they have any comments on this and if they want to intervene.
Well, thank you, Rafi. The idea that we need to work with on training and digital security is really salient, and I heard it quite a lot, and I totally agree with it. And so one additional point I may want to raise is that we could leverage this to say that civil society is working for the protection of security as a whole, so that if someone is not necessarily a civil society person but would like to learn about security, he should be or she should be welcome. And this was an approach that's been done in Yemen, for example, during the, let's say, just before the invasion of the Houthis of Sana'a. And we held a number of activities at the Internal Society local Yemen chapter, and there we actually opened up the idea of digital security for all. And so civil society were not it wasn't an exclusive civil society event, yet civil society felt an equal footing with the governmental representatives, with the private sector representatives, and with others, and felt empowered. I mean, they are now somewhat part of the big boys. It felt to them that, okay, now that we have them in an equal footing, on an equal level, we can communicate with them our concerns. And it indirectly led to some progress, I must say. I mean, it helped build bridges, eliminate, let's say, reduced the mistrust that used to happen in the past. It helped show that there's really no boogeyman happening in these closed rooms. So this contributed slowly but steadily to building up somewhat an openness attitude in the environment. So I'd say this is one way practically through which one could work on. The other thing is that we need to understand that there are certain concerns of the government that they would like to reveal, but they did not find the opportunity to. For example, the idea is that, okay, what if we don't have the expertise, local expertise, and though we know that they exist, but we can't approach them, we are somewhat shy or hesitant to acknowledge that we are weak. And this happened a lot, and I realized that government circles have been struggling with the same problems that human rights activists have been struggling with. And so that was an eye-opener for many in Yemen when we realized that it's a matter that concerns everyone. So, I mean, building on this, and I think this is the approach I would recommend internet society in itself to do, as now we have, as you know, Salam leading the regional bureau. And so taking an approach that shows that it's for all of us, it's a comprehensive, open, and multi-stakeholder approach that we are pursuing. And then no one is going to be left behind. No one intentionally or unintentionally should be felt marginalized and excluded. And as time progresses, I think this culture can build become stronger and resonate with the various stakeholders.
Thanks, Walid. I think you made a good point about reaching other stakeholder groups to build bridges, and in particular to build trust. Civil society is one player among others in the internet governance space, and I guess in some areas maybe we can even find alliances in specific topics. So I think it's one of the challenges in the region is how we can participate. Civil society has to deal with its own environment. So, Hamza, do you have an intervention here? Do you want to add something?
Rafiq, are you addressing me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I want to really describe a little bit of the activity of the MENA program. So, and I want to give my perspective not only as a policy analyst, but as a community builder as well. So, we in the MENA program, we give a lot of capacity building workshops and trainings for people who want to be actively involved in policy advocacy related to internet issues in the local countries, and as well people or activists who are interested in launching their advocacy projects. And I myself has been engaged in building national and cross-national grassroots movements in the MENA region. So, for example, in Tunisia, we have, and in many other countries, we have a really vibrant, dynamic set of authors who write about internet governance themes deemed really interesting to the local context. Of course, we have a lot of content and a lot of discussion, and we do a lot of capacity building. But the problem is that how we take those recommendations to a certain scientific level that can be recognized by the multi-stakeholder groups that we work with at the national level. And I have been personally engaged with a lot of local stakeholders, especially in Tunisia, to give incentives for a lot of communities on the ground to get engaged in internet governance. So how there is, I have like a secret, if I can say, like methodology to do that. So when I engage with the grassroots communities and try to give them more granular insight about the internet governance, where I face a lot of problems, because like Walid mentioned before, the internet governance concept is really wonky and complex. So you have to explain that the internet is a network of networks. Governance is not government. So it's an open process that invite private and public entities to try to study the process of internet governance. And you have, in that particular process, you have to build the knowledge of the community. You have to make them understand community resources, and you have to make them as well bring strong partnerships. So that's first layer I call the layer of building foundation. So the second layer here is to try to, after building the foundation, after really explaining for them the internet governance concept, try to raise a little bit the willingness of the capacity of those groups to be engaged in doing local activities. So you have to enroll them in different activities, involve them in local dialogue with other alliances, other civil society groups, people in you have to find channels to reach people in the government, as well kind of involve journalists, involve the local multi-stakeholder entities that they regulate and they are interested in the internet governance world. And that I see it as a part of the internet governance education that you should give to local grassroots communities. And you have to always make them feel and see the importance of engaging in internet governance to see change happening on local legislation, and how end users, for example, can use the internet to participate in the policy making circles in their own countries, to advocate for their own human rights, to see it as an incentive for them to get more engaged. And then the last step, which is to design activities for those networks or grassroots communities that you have built at the national or regional level. And you have to send them, and you say to them, go where they go, which means that you have to not to be bound by that climate of fear. You have to go and meet your government officials, be active, write on the internet, be engaged with local stakeholders that you see interested in your work and interested in your research, and that's how you invest in local. That's why you have to build and you have to link your own grassroots communities with the people who can influence the policy process, that they can learn from each other and know how they can advocate for their own projects or for their own or for the policies they want them to change. And one of the other methodology as well is to link as well your engagement to local media, to go to local radios, to go to local media, to try to open the space for dialogue about internet governance, sometimes wonky and complex issues. I mean, we do that in Tunisia, we do that in Morocco, we do that in Jordan now, being able to constitute this cross-national grassroots, but like in that kind of resiliency, in that kind of to see or to aim to see change happening while opening more space for discussion and opening more space for policy understanding. Then you can expect, if you see the change that you want to see, the government officials to change their policies and not remaining always at the receiving end of those policies, by trying to go against that culture in the Arab world of seeing policies being applied in a top-down fashion. So I have always been asking this question: how can we organize or better organize grassroots communities in a more rationalized behavior to have more impact in the policy process? And I think with the IPA, with the Internet Policy Analysis projects, with the ILA, with the click rights, with the activity that we do in IGMIN, I think we are in a favorable position now to really see like some of the successes that we have been seeing in implementing in the internet governance and the MENA. For example, in Algeria, for example, we have put opening the chapter of ISOC in the government mandate. In Tunisia, for example, we have built the Alliance Article 32. In Egypt, we have been writing and defending a lot the cybersecurity bills. And in other countries as well, we have been able to kind of build more trust between local multi-stakeholders of internet governance. So I should stop here so let other people speak. I'm sorry it was a little bit too long.
Hamza, you went through different points, and see if I try to understand it. You really highlighted about that how grassroots movement, that they should be maybe more methodological, more rational in the way of doing things.
Absolutely.
And I guess it's more it's a point about how to be really strategical here, and not just following an ad hoc approach on doing things. And you raised also the point about reaching to media and using them to reach more wider audience. So there are several points, and it's interesting to share some kind of practices and approaches here. But I think if we can really build maybe on the how to be strategical, because maybe it's more easier to say than to do. I'm not sure, maybe Mohammed want to intervene here or to add something? Mohammed?
I would like to talk more about the strategy, being strategic in planning. and this is like for me like one of the most worrying trends recently experienced in the region is that it's a problem of funding, which I think also pointed out earlier in the conversation. But I'd like to expand on it because it's really hard for civil society in the region to plan ahead because, well, one, the resources that are available to them are decreasing. Many funders are moving from providing funding to being implementers themselves. And therefore, for example, I'm talking about international and mostly Western funders. So they're taking the jobs away from the civil society. And of course, like without jobs, it's hard for civil society to operate. And if you look at sort of the earlier problems where, the reason why funders are doing this move is because they didn't see the results that they expected. And mostly because the projects that they've been funding have been like 6 months, 2 years, where it's really impossible to see sort of the kind of change that they were expecting, or sort of setting these incredibly high expectations. Because the kind of work that we do in building the sort of trust where you can see the changes, it's a cumulative process, and it takes years upon years sort of to and I've seen that experience through my work with APC, from their work in Africa, where they were 10 years ago and where they were now. And I think that civil society in the Arab region haven't been given that the same chance sort of to build these trust and build these networks and sort of build this long-term strategy, because we don't have support from the government, and the only support that we usually get is from the international funders that now won't even fund local projects and local civil society. So, and now we're seeing these implementers, these international implementers failing in the same way that the local civil society has failed before, and repeating the same mistakes and also making new mistakes along the way. So I think, like one of my major recommendations would be, in the paper we addressed government and civil society, but one of my major recommendations would be to funders. So we study their approach and sort of go back to supporting the local grassroots civil society and making sure that, for example, at the end of the day, that we have jobs, not just like lots of other resources that we cannot capitalize on because we're busy looking for funding to attend an IGF that's a million miles away, or because we're busy working on other freelance projects in order to support ourselves in our own livelihood. I think that's it for my intervention.
Thanks, Mohammed. I think you made a clear point about the kind of organizational and structural side with highlighting the issue of funding to make any efforts sustainable. While we heard civil intervention, I think also we need to leave some room for the for those who are watching us. And I think Hanan Boujami from IG MENA made a comment. She wanted to highlight, it's important to highlight that efforts to engage civil society should be planned and organized and not incidental. Saying that IG MENA program put a lot of effort in engaging people, but also in keeping them interested. This hangout activity is one example how we try to scale our work. The challenge we encountered is how to integrate civil society in the discussion in equal footing with other stakeholders. Governments from MENA have their own way of engaging. The private sector is completely absent. Civil society itself is quite scattered. I wonder if the speakers can provide an insight how we address this point. I think we try to address some of them, but maybe if some of you want to engage. We have 6 minutes left in this hangout, and we should at some time have a room to kind of wrap up and to see how we can move forward. Anybody want to answer the question or the comment from Hanan?
Well, it's Walid. I can chime in quickly. We have started an informal meeting as civil society organizations at RightsCon this year actually. Yeah, and the idea was to make sure that we mobilize, or let's say, understand each other and understand what we are doing and how to coordinate and build upon our resources and start something new, start something fresh, study the environment, study our resources, know what we can commit to, learn from each other, and begin working as a coherent set of different civil society organizations. So we're starting something. I think that it would be useful to point to that. Maybe Elsa would like to share her views on it.
Sure, thanks, Walid. Yeah, I agree with Walid. Something right now is starting to cook, as they say. We started it in RightsCon, and right now we're at the point where we have our objectives set. We still have to meet in Tunis in the coming IG-MENA summit. Eventually it's going to be an open coalition for anyone who's interested in collaborating with any civil society organization who is in the coalition. Basically, we also included people who are in civil society organizations in Iran, as well as in Turkey, not only the Middle East or North Africa or the Gulf. And it's a very interesting group of people who are so different. Some are technical, some are policy analysts, some are in a certain organization, some work on human rights. So it's a very diverse group, and I'm really looking forward to seeing if it's when it's going to be doing some concrete work after we finish with the base. I also wanted to add something, Rafiq, if I may. And this could also add to what Hanan also commented on, which is following up after training. And that's a trend that we've been seeing. May I, Rafiq?
Yes, sure. I didn't interrupt you, so you can go ahead.
Okay, all right. So one thing we've been seeing is that some trainings just happen once for a human rights defender, let's say, and then they leave him in the dark. So the importance of changing the term from training to coaching, and the importance of having a mentor or a coach stay with this human rights defender or the person who's taking a digital security thing is super important. Like Hamza and Hanan were mentioning about what IG-MENA does, same goes to Gulf Center. Like, we're trying our best to now shift from a training perspective to a coaching perspective, because it's very important to keep people engaged. And the only way you can do it is not to keep them in the dark, rather be there for them to ask any question. And hopefully with the MENA coalition, which Walid also mentioned, people would be more engaged and would be able to feel some sort of collective identity within that coalition, hopefully.
I think if I can add one point.
Yes, Hamza?
So I think that on the comments of Hanan, I think it is really important to try to strengthen engagement and collaboration with citizens and with people who are using the internet and who have common concerns to find solutions. And while doing that, I think you have to identify the people that can be bound together to try to influence the policy process, and try to find consensus among national multi-stakeholder groups. So how can you do that? But you have to have a certain understanding of the internet governance field itself. You have to rationalize your assumptions, and you have to get trained on how to analyze policy environments and decision-making process. So you have to really gain insights of the nature of policy environment that you're living, that you're interacting with at the national level. Of course, it is good to send people to the Arab IHAF. It is good to send people to ICANN to get them enrolled in the IETF fellowships and ISOC fellowships as well. But I think what happens at the local environment, your understanding of your local environment the most. I think this is, where we should focus. We should focus on giving really people local initiatives and local incentive to understand the local national environments. Then go to regional level, or go to international level to try to take the national concerns or the national policy problems at the regional and international level. And I think that building an insight on the nature of your local internet governance environment is key to start engaging with local grassroots communities that will write about the internet, will advocate about the internet, and in the long term will be able to change with policy recommendation. We're able to change policies, but this is like a work in progress. And what we try to do and what we try to establish is really strong national and cross-national movements that can yield success in terms of seeing change happen when it comes to the policy process in the MENA region.
Okay, thanks, Hamza. I think maybe we can take 5 minutes more to give time for Mohammed and Walid to make a further comment. But I just want to kind of summarize what I am hearing. It's interesting to make the point about how to move from just training to more coaching. And this is, I guess, the point about having a network of alumni or mentorship and so on, and create a network that to share information and knowledge and expertise. And it's also good to talk about the idea of coalition that's ongoing and that should be open soon for more organization and people to join. The idea is really to create a platform where organization and activists, they can coordinate. And that's the point. It's about coordination and collaboration. I don't want to take more time, but I want to give the time for Mohammed to comment. Yes, Mohammed.
Hello. I think I mean, from my perspective, I think I sort of like to challenge the statement that civil society itself is scattered, because I think from my point of view, I think society has done in the region has extended itself and tried to collaborate on many successful ways in recent years. This program might be an example. We also have other examples from the region, platforms like the Sharok, publications like Digital Citizen, and if you look at campaigns, for example, to free Allah and Nasser, or two human rights defenders that are in prison right now because of their activities online. I think civil society has done a really good job in the region of collaborating on digital rights issues. If anything, the challenge is because governments are scattered, not civil society. We've seen sort of how the Arab AGF has been handled, for example. We really didn't have a chance to engage on it as well as we could because it's always been not clear when it's happening. They have done a poor job of organizing at least the last two events. And now, as far as I know, there won't be another IGF this year still. I think we don't have, and if you compare it to other regions like Latin America or Africa, where governments actually do regional work together, civil society in those regions have a better chance of engaging. So I look forward, for example, to having more regional initiatives from governments that we can engage on, such as, for example, the North African IGF, or perhaps more national IGF that we can interact with.
Thanks, Mohammed. Maybe we can give now the token to Walid if you want to add something. Walid?
No, I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. We really heard a lot of suggestions and comments, and it's important here to follow up. And the Hangout, it was an opportunity to kind of elicit the input and feedback about the situation first, and then what can be done, what we can learn from other experience, and depending of the speaker's experience, what can be, what need to be changed. at least we acknowledge that the environment need to change, and there are maybe some ways to do so, and also from the civil society to work more toward coordination, collaboration, and kind of building maybe structure or organization to have its efforts sustained in the long term. And I think we heard also about different initiatives, like for MENA, or also for ISOC, with having a new bureau in the region to do more activities. And so we need maybe more here, more initiatives to be pushed, and the idea of having a coalition for civil society in MENA region, it's quite important, because it would create in a platform for everyone to work together, sharing best practices and experience. So I'm to be honest, I'm quite positive here in what can be done. And if I can share here for the APC, or the Association for Progressive Communication, there will be a follow-up for this. You will hopefully see in coming days some blog posts to summarize what was discussed and to think what can be done in the region. And also for MENA, there is the summit coming soon, and it's an opportunity to discuss in the different session about those different issues and see what we can do. So I tried here to summarize some points, but anyone else want to add something, kind of last words, or to share some thoughts?
I think I always say that when I am in a panel, or where this is my famous quote. So if you wanna really understand, if you wanna be an internet policy analyst, you don't only need to have a legal background or a technical background or a policy background about the internet. But I think in the context of the MENA region, you have to understand the behavioral aspect of using the internet by the end users. So you have to have human skills to really understand the psychology of the people and the culture of the people who use the internet in the MENA region. And if you have a grasp of the behavioral aspect of the people, you can see what are the best policies and what those people need when it comes to to internet governance, and then try to couple that with your expertise that you have at the legal. I think I'm pretty positive as well that people will make the change that unfolding, and for that we need collaboration. I think we need some kind of level of consensus and scientific input. So from my side, I'm pretty positive to see change happening.
Okay. Thanks, Hamza. I think we have quite a substantive discussion here, a lot of ideas, and hopefully we will follow up and continue the work and the discussion maybe in other space. I want to thank the speakers for spending the time to share their thoughts, and also to thank those who are watching us now in YouTube. So hopefully see you soon, and thanks again. Bye.
Thank you, Rafik.
Thank you very much. Bye.